Okay, so we are holding on Amud Lamed Daled, the paragraph that begins with Zeu Gamkin Innat Shuvah, which is a continuation of what we have been saying before. That we described the three dagas, the three levels of Avos Hashem, where you have Ava the B'chol Avav B'chol Nafshecha, which is one category, but that is an Ava which is limited, an Ava which is mugbul and defined and contained within the parameters of the Hisponenus, which was what stirred those feelings of Ava in the first place. The idea that initiated, was the catalyst for a person to develop feelings of Avat Hashem, was a recognition that Hashem is the chayas of every single thing that exists. And that's the Ikka chayas. And it's deserved that a person should have a deep desire to cleave and attach and become more alive. Ubacharta b'chaim. Not just themselves, but everything around them. There should be a hispashtus achayim. There should be this dispersion of life, of godliness, of elikus, into everything that exists, such that the ikka of everything, the chayas eliki, which is mechaya everything, should be recognized, acknowledged for its primacy, its significance, and everything else should be insignificant. And that is the avda b'chol avavcha. And the b'chol nafshecha is the shuv, where you realize in order to do that you have to engage in Torah mitzvahs to bring about that gilui of elikus in the world. Fine. But we acknowledged that that is dealing only with a limited, it's always going to be contained and limited. It's going to be limited base because the very hisponenus itself is limited. And you're only concentrating on the Eir Liki, which itself is Mitzumtzum and Mugbal. But when we go beyond that, which is the Avda B'chol Meidecha, this is from Etzem HaNefesh. And the way to stir in a person these intense feelings from the Etzem HaNefesh, the Avda B'chol Meidecha, comes about through the shock, the horror of being in the Neshama in a guf. To really chapsich, to recognize how the richuk, how much you've become distanced, separated, and detached from your sheir shemakim, and that distress can become, if it's done, if it's cultivated properly, can reach to a point of a person's deep yearning to connect to Atmos Ein Sof, above and beyond all the constraints and limitations of themselves and the world around them. We associated that with the idea of bitush, that a person's, what you might call self-harming, but in a positive way, as a means to an end of self-reflection, such that a person acknowledges their detachment from kedusha and elikus, and that arouses in them something very deep and essential. And we're going to now associate this Aveda, the Aveda of the B'chol Meidecha, with two more things. To Shuvah generally, and specifically the Inyan of Tequila Shofar. So let's go back into the text, and where ultimately at the bottom of Lamed Hey, we're going to be Mesakim, we're going to come to some type of a summary and conclusion of how this is all associated with the Inyan of Smile. Smilei tachas l'reish. It's dafka through smile, through this intense form of Aveda, that a person is able to access and express the Reish HaNeshama, the Etzem HaNeshama. Okay, so the bottom Lamed Dalet. V'zeu gam kinyan Shuvah. This is also the very concept of Teshuvah. We know that what is Shuvah? Shuvah is not Aveda Haragila. It's not the ordinary Seder Aveda. It goes above and beyond the ordinary process and constraints associated with Avedas Hashem. Because Shuvah is for where you've gone against the rules of the game, And if you want to be able to be forgiven and to repair the problems that you've caused through your behavior, you have to go outside of the miskeret. You have to go outside of the framework of rules and obligations to be able to fix it. Because within rules and obligations, you've got nothing to return to. Shuvah is something which is above and beyond the constraints of ordinary Avodas Hashem. So we know that Shuvah is accessing an aspect of the self. When you're in a state of Shuvah, you're Baal Teshuvah. When you're in a state of Shuvah, it means that you're going beyond the ordinary structures, such as Seichel and Midas, the Aveda Pnimis of Seichel and Midas, Tam B'das, and you're accessing something much more profound, and that enables you to fix all the problems associated with your behavior, which in the realm of Tam B'das. Like it says in the pasuk, "Mima'amakim krosicha havaya," from the very depths I call out to you, Hashem. It's from the oimek, comes from the pnimius hanashama. Yeah, so it's from the very depths of the self where a person is able to stir up this sense of teshuvah. The lochein, and that's why therefore because tzaddikim is a perfection of the Seder HaAvodah, which is in a Seder Mugbelas, in an ordinary fashion. In the ordinary manner of using your Seichel and your Midas, the Seder HaRogil, the ordinary Avodas Hashem, is the Avodah of a Tzaddik, the perfection of that. Whereas about Shuvah is above and beyond that. And that's why the Bali Shuvah are able to reach a Madrega which is beyond that which is achievable by the Tzaddikim Gemurim. The K'moya Havrish Ba'avidas HaNeshama K'moy Shehi L'mayla La'avidos L'mata B'slapshus U'b'guf Sh'nis Boilil, comparable to the way we distinguish between the Avidah and the Neshama, the way it is L'mayla. Chai Avaya Mati, the fun of the Avidas and Neshama L'mayla is, whilst extraordinary on the one hand, nevertheless in the dagger of Amidah, it's still fixed and rooted in a very contained category. Whilst when the neshama comes into a guf, it's capable of going out of those bounds and those limitations. Similarly too, you have this distinction between Avodas Tzadikim and Avodas Bali Tshuva. Tzadikim will be considered oindim, that as much as they achieve and everything, it's all within the same category of self, whereas Bali Tshuva go from one extreme to another extreme. And that capacity to go from an extremity to another extremity is extremely profound. When we talk about tzaddikim, their avodah is where everything is organized, expected, and predictable. All within the keiches pnimiyim of the self, person's intellectual and emotional consciousness. The tzaddik is able to achieve a perfection of that Seder Avodah. But because it's in Seichel and because it's in Midas, it's limited to those categories and the extent to which the Seichel is able to comprehend and the Midas are able to fill. It's not unconstrained intellect, it's not unconstrained emotions. Comes to the Avodah Bali Tshuva, they sort of skip over the line. They go above and beyond the boundaries. They go outside of the constraints entirely. Because they tap in to the very essence of their soul, which is a hazaza. It's a real shaking up of the whole premise of their existence. And that's what we say in the pasuk. of the Shia Mailas, which we say during Asher Shemei Shuvah, or mima'amakim karasicha. That the calling out comes from the oimek, comes from the very pnimius of the neshama of the Baal Shuvah. B'chinas oimek pnimius nafsheichuli. And that enables the person to have a karasicha, a calling out to you, to the Eibush himself. Because it's coming from the pnimius of the person, it's able to reach or address itself to the very pnimius of Alikus. Yeah?
Yeah.
Because so just like we explained before about how does a person get to the avodah of avodah b'chol ma'idecha, which is comparable to the idea of teshuvah. How did it come about for the avodah b'chol ma'idecha? It came through the helam v'hester of the guf and the awareness of that. Similarly too, where does teshuvah come from? It comes from the meitzah. It comes from the distress of the constraints of the ordinary self. The neshama prior to doing teshuvah was in a state of being bound up and attached to all inyone, tumah, and impurity, darkness, death, evil, absolute evil. So when that person is aroused in the bitterness of his soul at this state of affairs, and wishes to escape from this darkness and evil and death, meaning from the extreme distress that the neshama feels from the extent of the person's sins and transgressions, which affect himself truly. Brings a person to an absolute screaming out, a huge cry of bitterness and crying and fasting. The whole. We're not just talking about crocodile tears here. We're talking about real distress. They called out to Hashem in their distress. Like all these psukim. Like we say in the davening, especially before Tequila, that's from the constraints that I called out to Hashem. That this narrowness, these straits, where a person is extremely distressed from their sins, enables a person to call out to Hashem in a very doesn't mean a simple cry. Simple in the sense
simplistic.
No, not the opposite of simplistic. That's what I'm saying. Simple, not in the sense of simplistic. Simple is impure. That the crying out comes from the walls of their heart. To the point where a person can reach a state of absolute expiration of the soul. Like we have the example, Lazman Zadaya, whose soul left him in tears. In his distress. So all the things we explained previously in the previous shir about Avda B'chol Meidecha maps on very much to the concept of Teshuvah. Yeah?
Yeah.
And the same thing is true when it comes to the inyan of Sheifa. V'zeu inyan Tequila. If you remember the beginning of the hemshekh, we had a bunch of questions about Sheifa, the importance of Sheifa. The Sheifa is a mitzvah klolis. How can it be doicha? How can you doicha Shabbos because of Shabbos? Because of, why should so many tzaddikim miss out on the mitzvah of Sheifa just because of some Kali Adas? People that don't know the Hilchos Shabbos are gonna be over on it. It's so important. Sheifa is so important. So now we're gonna have a little inkling of why Sheifa is so important. And this is the Tequila, the same concept of the Tequila that we have in Tequila Shefa. Shubechinas curl poshet. A Tequila is a curl poshet, right? It's a simple note. Doesn't have any trills. It's not a shvarim, it's not a trua. Simple one note. Bebechinas tzaika pnimis mi umke de liba. And it reflects the inner outcry that comes from the depths of the heart. Shenasim in Ameta Anal, which is brought about because of the sort of the claustrophobia, the meitzah, this claustrophobia of being in a sham in a guf, and the association with Tuma and Moves and Ra and Choshech. But the Achakach, and after the Tekiah, it breaks down into a Shvarim Teruah, the other two notes of Tekiah Shefa, which we explained in the Gemara, is Genuchi Ganiach v'Yiluli Yolam, are forms of sobbing and crying. When this distress reaches even further into the person's neshama, he can't find any place for himself. There's no comfortable place to return to. The person there's such a hazozes kol atzmusay, he can't sit down. There's no hanacha, there's no yishuv, there's no comfort anywhere. He can't be, someone's is in a state of distress. You try to calm them down. You find a way of that they can come back to themselves. But in this instance, the person can't come back to themselves. And he can't even. He's got to the point where he can't even have the composure to make a simple curl poshet. That would already be a state, now in his new state of deeper distress, that was already comfort. That was already control. He could make a simple note. It was under control. Things were under control. He cried, he complained and everything, he was distressed, but it wasn't out of control. Now it's out of control. He's sobbing and crying and everything, and he can't come back to himself.
Like people when they're about to, babies when they're about to cry, that.
Yeah, the breath is, they can't even get the breath. Like by way of example, somebody who has a tremendous problem and pain, which affects into the very depths of his psyche. Person cries out. You can't explain why he's upset, just ends up crying. If the problem that the person's experiencing only affects them in their in their more superficial state, meaning the way they are able to rationalize things and emote about things, it's possible to explain it and speak it out. When it reaches to the very core of the person's being, then it's just a matter of wailing and crying, because it can't be expressed in words. But even that is something. You're able to belt out a cry when the matter is something that you can engage with at some level. Then you can cry. Because even the cry is an expression of the self. The self is still in order in some way or other. That's when your heart, your emotional state is negotiable, it's workable. It's something that can receive an experience and it can respond to it. It's respondable, it's expressible, it's experienceable. But when the pain is so deep, to the point where the person has absolutely no way of containing themselves, the heart squeezes. It's so verquetscht. You can't even get out a cry. The pain is so deep. You just have these little bleats of a sort of sobbing. So the same thing is true when it comes to a person acknowledging and appreciating the extent to which, through their Avedas, through their Chatoim Avedas, through their sins and transgressions, they have become so sunken in the depths of Klippus, Chas v'Shalom, Chmon L'Islam. This is something which affects the person, can affect the person to the very core of their being. To the point where they don't have anywhere to turn. They can't control themselves. They can't calm themselves down. Due to this awareness of their sunkenness into the depths of Tumah and Klippa and Zidrach. And they are so far and detached from godliness. They can't put on a performance, even if it's an honest performance. They can't express that feeling. That feeling is not expressible, even in a simple sound. For sure, not in words, but not even in a controlled expression, emotional explosion of a kol poshet. But because of the extent of this tremendous distress that he feels that is affecting the person so deeply, you can only sob and give out short cries. Because the person cannot come back to themselves. You have such an expression. You need to come back to yourself, to restore yourself, because of this tremendous pain. And that is what it is, the inyan of shvarim through. And the activity of blowing the shofar in a manner of tequila and then shvarim and then truah is an escape. That is the manner in which a person can escape from this constraint. And it's a way in which the neshama just, leaves all of those problems and cleaves and attaches themselves to Atmas Ein Sof. And this elicits a response. And we have what it says in the Pasuk about the tequila that comes milamayla, that the Eibush himself is going to blow the shofar. So in your mashakosov achakach anoni b'merchav ka, and that's what it says in the pasuk afterwards. After min hameitza karasi ka, the calling out that comes from the meitza, you get the anoni b'merchav ka from mamish, from the merchav, the expansiveness that overcomes the restrictions and the limitations of the self. Okay, so Taket Yeshef is al derech, the inyan of, is broadly speaking the inyan of Shuvah, is a playing out of the inyan of Shuvah at the moment of Rosh Hashanah, which itself is the inyan of is the same idea as Avodah B'chol Meidach. It's all about an avodah which comes from the Pnimius HaNefesh and is able to approach Atmas Ein Sof. Unlike the avodah B'chol Levavcha B'chol Nafshecha. Yeah. And this is all dependent on the distress. It only comes about because of the distress. And the distress is a result of the smile, of the left, of the Midas Hadin, as we're now going to explain. Yeah? We can go weiter? So from all of the above, the explanation of the three aves, and the inyan of Shuvah and the inyan of Tequila Shofar, we can now understand what we brought originally in the pasuk. Smile tachas l'reish. It's dafka through smile doicha, a person can reach the Rosh Hashanah. The b'chdei lavi the bechinas reish v'atmas haneshama is alidei smile dafka. Yeah, so he just repeats that the Kudah he said at the beginning. So now we can understand. Any spoiler, all the Bichdesha Yiyah, Skalas, Bechinas Primis, for Atzmas and Neshama, Bechinas is Eres Harotzi, the Bechol Neidecho. We've just explained how, in order to reach the Primis and the Atzmas and the Neshama, the very essence of the soul, in a manner of his Eres, they should be aroused and want to cleave to Hashem in a manner of Bechol Neidecho. So, Davka al Yidei Shiflus. How's that achieved? Davka through Shiflus, through the person's downtroddenness. Shemash Bilas Atzmai. This self-awareness that the person is distanced from Elikus, and the contemplation about that, the processing of that. And similarly too, through all of the constraints a person experiences from the tremendous concealments and hiddenness that comes about through being in a Neshama in a Guf and living in Ilam Hazim, which is intensified and made worse through the person's behavior of sins and transgressions. All these things, the shiflos, the meitzah, the chatoim avenos, all of these are smel deicha. So inin asmel mashpilas atzmei. It's the utilization. The person strategy is a strategy of smel. The person utilizes a characteristic of smel, which is din, which is judgment, which is self-critique. You're criticizing yourself for your distance from Elikus, all of the concealments, all of your behavior. This is an employment of the... So, smoile, tachas l'reishi, if you want to get to the Rosh Hashanah, you have to employ the tactic of smoile. So that's the person sort of behaving in a smile way, right?
Yeah.
Their strategy in Avodas Hashem is smile. The ikare, however, the main notion of smile, who bechinas smile el, the smile elyon, the divine smile, the smell that comes from Elikus. This is the primary factor in all of this. How does a person become motivated to be so harsh on themselves and so critical of themselves? That stems from the smell ha'elyon. We're going to explain what that is. Just like we see on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Then the Aveda is primarily in a manner of Smaldecha. What do the Eden do? They make themselves like poor people and downtrodden and people in distress, people without anything. That's how people behave in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. They have that self-awareness. Similarly, through the confessions we make on the Seshmi Yom Kippur, we say Hashem Bagadnu the whole time. We declare all of our problems. And this is all to stir up and arouse in the person a true state of teshuvah that comes from the very core of themselves. To return to Hashem sincerely. Canal being into Tequila, just like we just described above in the paragraph about Tequila. Why is it that Yidden on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur and the Sheshmei Shuvah are in such a state of self-awareness and self-judgment and self-critique and are able to make all these declarations? Because that is the Zman when there's a Gilui of the Smoila Elyon. Kamesha Kosov, like we say, Choshev Avaya Ezrei Kotshi. Hashem stretched out his holy arm. Pirish Bezei Pinchas, Tafri Yishdalet Amid Beis, Shekoy Al Rosh Hashanah, Oz, Choshev Hashem Ezrei Kotshi, Yishu Bechinas HaGvura. So the Zohar explains, when does the pasuk, when it says Choshev Hashem Ezrei Kotshi, there's a Gilui of the Eibish's Zraya, That's the time of Rosh Hashanah, Session Shuvah. And what is Zrei Kodshrei? Zrei Kodshrei is Bechinas Gvura. Kameshikosu B'Yeminoi U'Vizrei Uzay. So we have psukim that associate the Zraya with the Inyan of Gvura. Shemiskala Oz. That's when it's revealed. How is a person capable of being so honest with themselves, so exacting with themselves, and so critical of themselves? Is because in that Zman there's a gilui of Hashem's Gevura, Hashem's Din, Midas Hadin, the Shmuel HaElyon. And that triggers, serves as a catalyst for the individual to also behave in that way. And this is therefore the meaning of, with his left arm, his left arm is under my head. It's indicating in the pasuk that it's dafka through smile that a person is able to reach an even higher madriga than they can through yamin. Yamin etchabkeni. Yeah, like you said at the beginning. We said in
at the beginning, right, of this, yeah, not at the beginning of this moment, but in the middle.
Yeah. The Yemim Mekarev is bechinas hagilu alikus shemei ba'ilumis. What the Yemim Mekarev refer to refers to the way alikus is nisgal in this world. Shekol is bechinas ha'or levad, which can only be a ha'or. V'aved v'zeu aved b'seichel midais. This is the aved b'seichel midais. This is the aved b'chol levav chol nafshecha. V'asog this bein is midas aved yirish al pi seichel. Shekol is bechinas Yemim Mekarev. It's behind bechinas aved b'chol levav chol nafshecha levad. Right? Yemim Mekarev is all in the category of the things we described are associated with Avd b'chol levav chol nafshecha, which is mugbal, it's this galus which is only a ha'ara levad because it's the eirma tzumtzum, it's eirma malkal almim. Aval al yidei smoilei, al yidei zebal b'chinas Avd b'chol meidecha, shu ba'aved b'chinas atzmus v'muhus hanefesh, shu b'chinas reishi, k'meishi b'chinas rotzi v'muhus v'atzmus ein tzei v'choli. The impact of Shmuel HaElyon, the Gilui, Shmuel HaElyon, is such that a person is able to arouse within himself the dagger of small deicha, of being honest and critical with himself, to the point where they are so distressed by the reality of their existence, their lomas v'stadium, their averas, and their richut melikus, that it's ma'ira, the reish haneshama, the pnimius haneshama, the atzmus neshama, to be in a tnuah of rotzei, to be in a tnuah of cleaving and yearning for atzmus ein seif. Yeah.
For?
Muhus lev atzmus ein seif, baruch. Yeah, atzmus muhus. Muhus for atzmus ein seif.
What's the beast doing? What's the beast doing?
The rotzei. What is the rotzei in?
Not in like in space, but like in
yeah, which
focus.
In which, yeah.
If we carry on, we're not going to have any. What we're going to do tomorrow?
Okay, nothing to do.
Should we finish the whole thing? Either finish the whole thing, or if you can, yeah.
We've got to finish this paragraph now. We're in the middle of an akudah. It's the next paragraph, and we'll do the. What we'll do is do the next paragraph, and then tomorrow we'll finish the Maimah and
see some unit
and discuss it.
Okay, let's go.
So al yidei ze mamshich bechinas v'yimin etchabkein bebechina umadreg al yena har b'yisa, and it has an impact. If the aveda hepsechan, if the aveda begins with the smel deiche, with smel tachas l'reishi, then that's the rotzei. Then the shuv, the yimin etchabkeini, is in a manner which is above and beyond what it was originally. We said before, yimin etchabkeini is the union of elikus, which is machayim mahavas ilamis, but it's only a ha'ara levad. It's an irma tzumtzum, in order to be able to be mislabish in every single different and variegated category of existence. But if the Avodah is premised and is preceded on by an Avodah of Smeldeicha, then the Yemin Techapkeni is itself enhanced. Commission spoiler, just like in the section when we were talking about Avodah B'chol Meidecha, that causes a gilui of Atzmas Ein Sof. So in Yemashakos Mima'amakim Krosicha, because we said that when it comes from Mima'amakim, when it comes from the depths and the essence of the soul, it can address itself to Krosicha, to Atzmas Ein Sof. Shekoira al Yidei Zela B'chinas HaAtzmas B'gilui. The Achas Man HaMeitzah Krosika Achakach Anoni B'merchavka. You have the process. If it all starts off in a manner of Min HaMeitzah Krosika, then the Anoni is not just an Anoni which is Mutzumtzum Umugbal, it's an Anoni which is B'merchav. Similarly, though he said, when we blow the shofar, then the shofar gets blown by the Eibusha, which is even more profound. Which comes as a result and because of the Tequila shofar de lamata. V'zeu b'chinas yemini techabkeni. She'acha b'chinas militach the reish of Yom Kippurim. This is the whole idea of techabkeni, which comes after the Avedus militach the reish of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Nimshach achaka b'chinas yemini techabkeni b'chag Sukkos b'chinas makiv v'shmini atzeres nimshach b'gilu b'pnimi eschuli. So the giluyim, the rotzei of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, is able to cause a hemshekh, a gilu yemini techabkeni, which is on Sukkos. And in a man of Makiv, and Shmini Atzeres b'pnimis. It's boiler ill. The Gilui b'chinas ha'atzmus u'b'chinas ha'toira k'meishi b'atzmus mamish. The Elikim levadei hevin darko. And what we explained above was that this was this Gilui is a Gilui of Torah. How is atzmus niskala? It's niskala in Torah. But not just Tam Torah, the Torah the way is in Atzmus. So there's a Torah which is the Torah of Avon of Asaka, right? It's a Torah which you can understand. But it's the category of Chochmaschem, Binaschem, right? It's Chochma Bina, Seichel. But then there's the Torah which is Mushrish and Atzmus in Seif. And similar to what we learn in the Maimai and Ches, of in Bereshis of Eish Chayra al Eish Levana. You have the Torah which is able to mislabish an Eisius, which is the Eish Chayra. Then you have the Klaf, which is the Eish Levana, which is the Pnimius of Torah, which can't even mislabish an Eisius. So we're saying here that the Gilui is a Gilui which is manifest in Torah, and this is the diagram of Torah we were talking about in that moment. Nimshach achas meilu tachas l'reishi b'chinas reish v'atzmus n'neshama k'meishi chavuka dvuka b'ch b'chinas atzmus ein seif. Oz nimshach b'chinas yidmin t'chapkeni sheb'chinas teira k'meishi b'atzmusei shenimshach b'pnimius b'shmini atzeres v'simchas teira. Okay, spelling out again the nekuda we just mentioned. That you have the seder smeldeicha min b'kareves, and because the smeldeicha reaches to atzmus ein seif, then the yemin t'chapkeni is also a gilui of Atzmus Ein Sof. So shekos b'seir the ike shteimus avedu lahamshich b'chinas atzmus yisbar zeh al yidei smel davka, and this is what we brought from the Zohar. This is the pulchan of the shleimus of the kula. This is the perfect form of aveda. Shleimus aveda is how? It's davka the labim, right? It's the inyan of smell, the inyan of gevura, midas adin. Right? There's a davka boim the b'chinas reishi, because only then can you reach the etzem of the neshama, which can address itself to the Atzmus Ein Sof. And then can bring about the Gilu Elikus in world, not just of a Gilu Elikus, which is model mugbal, which is a limited and contained in Matzumtzum Dika'ir, but rather Atzmus Ein Sof. So in Yeskalas Hu Da Atika, Gilu B'chinas Atik, Shu Gilu Ha'atzmus. He said, who, Ba'avad Alevi, who, that through the Aved of Levi, and if you remember, it's been a while. We started this already in Seshmi Shuvah, no? On Amud Chav Zayin, V'avad Alevi hu, to hu da atika. We quoted from the Zayah. And that's why Isgalus who is Da Atika. Gilu b'chinas Atik, Gilu Atzmus b'chinas Tachtein Sheva Maitza. Right? So we map it on to the Dargis it was talking about in the Zoya, by Mashkos Min Atik, with the Ramasko Mishnah Gzarafel, the Rishon Ches. Ubesheir Shosh, you b'chinas who. Actually, never Elam Hayo who Ushmei Levad. Sheirish Amitin Shom Sol is a Mailam Yatera. And here we're saying it's all in Torah. Even deeper than that, who is the Darga of Elikus, which is the Sheirish and Shams Yisrael, which is even higher than Torah. Who bechinas ha Torah kamishi ba'atzmus ein seif cholik, kamishi spoiler b'dir masri yichayim me'yimayim. So even in Atzmus ein seif, in yichayim me'yimayim, we talked about we compared the Sheirish and Makir, the Shams Yisrael, and Torah. Torah is Chitzenius Ak, Shams Yisrael Pnimius Ak, and even in Ein Seif Shlifnei Tzimtzum, the Shams Yisrael were even deeper, and Mushrish deeper in Atzmus Ein Seif, the Ein Seif Shlifnei Tzimtzum. So similarly over here, the Yeminit Chabkeni, the hemshekh, Milamayla, is from the very highest Madrigas of Elikus. And all because of why? Because it was initiated by Smol Deicha. And how was the Aved of Smol Deicha initiated? Because of the Gilu of Smela Elyon. We can understand that is the Midas Hadin. So why did Hashem want to create the world Midas Hadin? Because if there's a Gilu of Midas Hadin, then there can be, that's the Yisrus Le'ela. And then the Yisrus Le'zata that comes middle Mata L'mayla is going to be in a manner of Smol Deicha, of self-critique, of bitush, of minam meitzar, which is able to go above and beyond all of the hakbolas and limitations of ordinary Avodas Hashem.
And then need to reach a high level of the Minit right?
And then you can have you can have Gilu Atmos Lamata as a response. So it's all good. That is why the Eibush wanted to create the world, the Midas Hadin. It's a good idea, no? So tomorrow we'll see the Hasbara, why, unfortunately, or depending on perspective, it was not a viable route to keep the world going. But we'll see that tomorrow, B'ezras Hashem.